I want to build on something you brought up because I know this is something that a lot of leaders struggle with. We talk so often about traits that are critical to being an effective leader is being authentic and transparent. So in a time of crisis, how do you balance transparency with the reality that sometimes there's confidential information that cannot be communicated, in some cases for legal reasons? So any advice on striking that balance?
Back to the teamwork piece. As a professional communicator, and Staci knows this, we're a subject matter expert on about that much. I used to say I'm about an inch deep and 10 miles wide because I need a legal expert. I need the operational expert. Whatever the crisis is, there's someone that actually owns that issue from that they're about, an inch wide and 10 miles deep. And it's a matter of bringing those folks together and figuring out what the common operating picture is or common picture is, to include the legal folks, to include the folks who understand what the liability and what the second and third order effects are of what you're dealing with. Or maybe you don't even know what that is. But until you lay that flat with the team, you're not sure what you can communicate and what you can't. And the other thing you have to, once you know that, particularly the legal side and the communication side, and Staci knows this, oftentimes there's legal reasons, or in the military, national security and operational reasons from a classification standpoint. You just can't give certain details because it would compromise intellectual property in the civilian world, for example. It would put you in a liability standpoint, either financially or as far as being at fault. But at the same point in time, you've got to balance that with a need and in the many cases in the public sector, the right to know. And so it's a balancing act. And I won't say one side wins or doesn't. It's a matter of trying to get it right. And at times, the legal side has to win as much as you might want to say something so you can get your story out as clearly as possible. But you've got to take into account the legal things. But at the same point in time, there's a risk reward with that. You can lose or win the battle, but lose the war reputationally or something else if all you are completely concerned about is the short-term legal liability. You may cause long-term irreparable harm from a reputational damage standpoint. So where's the balance? And there's no right answer to that. You got to figure it out as you go, and it's not easy. It definitely takes a professional team to have good, honest exchanges as you do it, and leave your ego and your feelings at the door as you try to do what's best for the organization.
Great advice. Staci, I'm interested in what you have to share, because this reminds me of the example you were just talking about where you had to do layoffs, and treating people with respect and, being as upfront as you possibly can so it doesn't come as this completely out of left field.
Yeah, I think exactly what Kurt said is spot on. It's a balancing act. The only thing I would add to that is sometimes acknowledging that you can't share everything. There's a reason I can't, I can only, this is under investigation, or, we've had players who have been, suspended for steroids, or they're under investigation, acknowledging to the media or the employees, like, at this point, I can share with you what I know. And I know there was a message in the chat that asked about what happens when you're communicating every 6 hours, but you don't have any new information. Obviously, that's not ideal, but the fact that you're acknowledging the stakeholders, or in this case, probably the families, as Kurt was dealing with, the fact that you're hearing them and you're visible to them, I think is also just as important as being present is very important. You may not have the updated information that you hope to have, but at least continuing to acknowledge their presence and letting them know. But I do think it's important to always acknowledge to the employees or whoever your audience is, look, at this point, I can share with you X, at this point, or I'm not at liberty to expand on this for, security issues or, pending investigation or things like that. I think acknowledging is super important. It doesn't solve the matter, but I do think you're hearing, you're previewing to the press or to the audience that you know what questions they want answered, and you just might not be able to share that information or as specific as they want. And then the only thing I would also add, which is Kurt alluded to as well, is having the experts up there as much as you can is more credible than having what I like to call the talking heads. And that would be me, that would be Kurt, and I think that's very important. Like if there's a legal issue, having the general counsel speak, or if there's a financial issue or a player injury, having the team doctor or whatever, it's really important to have the experts there, and prep them. Like my job is to make sure that they're fully prepared to answer any question that's going to come up, but it's more credible for the organization to hear exactly from the expert in the field as opposed to the press spokesperson. And I always say that a really good press person is an invisible press person, that you are prepping your CEO or your general manager, or whoever it is, your mayor, and they're going out there and really answering the tough questions because it's good for the organization to hear directly from those folks.
Excellent. Talking about the importance of communicating, even if you're unable to share details or don't have new information, reminds me of the quote I shared at the very beginning, that the quickest way to lose a story in the middle of a crisis is to tell no story at all. And I just think of the family members. If there's an absence of any communication, you just go to the darkest place, even if that might be the outcome. But just
someone else comes in and fills the void.
Exactly.
Someone will take control of your message if you're not. I call it feeding the beast, explaining the method to your madness. Whatever it is, like don't let someone else take control of your message. And with social media and we have ways of communicating, not to say you bypass the press, you always work in collaboration with the press, but you also have other ways to communicate with your customers or your employees via social media, email, whatever, and take that opportunity to do so.